You're going to want to sit down for this one. Alex ANSARY, here it is, July 10th in the year 2019. So in this video, we are going to go deep into the concept of how the powers that be use the solar cycles against us. There's a series of essays that I'm bringing to completion this week. And then we're going to start doing updates, talking about asteroids, talking about other updates to the solar sciences. But right now, I'm going through a series of essays highlighting how I believe that the powers that be, in some cases, even manufacture certain events. The slideshow is on random rotation. We have other info slides that I want you to be aware of as we go through this. Now, there's a series of slides that we have that relate to the rise and fall of solar activity and the actual events that took place. So I started counting the solar cycles 1, 2, 3, 4 back in the 1700s. In the West, they started looking at sunspot counts in the 1600s. It's in China where we get the sunspot counts that go back thousands of years. So this is information that's been around a few years. Notice the correlation, and we are going to start easing our way into this. So before we go deep into the staging of conflicts per se, looking at other influences that could contribute to conflicts during solar peaks. Advanced knowledge that may exist on the solar influence is used against humanity, where a deeper disclosure of the public seems suppressed even now in 2019. Yet the things that I'm talking about, I feel that it's hidden in plain sight. The influences of the sun that leads to war are not always planned. For example, examine a gang turf. Do the analysis around that, how the beefs start exploding all at once, right? People start shooting. It's a loop of energy that feeds off itself for the multiple gangs involved in the war, right? Think about these things taking place unplanned in major cities during peaks of solar cycles. I've witnessed it. As we could see, the emotionalism getting the best of them. In some cases, during economic downturns, like the gang wars of the late 80s and early 90s, also late 90s, things saw an uptick. We've also seen an uptick in violence in 2010, 11, 12, 13, also recently. So other periods in which the field comes active after a quiet period. These are common themes. Local bars see more fights. I'm sure bouncers could tell some stories if they got interested in the solar cycles and could see like periods in which they were the most active dealing with mobs. Noticing people partying hard also in society, not always responsibly. So I would call it the inebriation effect, or the effect of the sun when people are numbing themselves out beyond what is considered by most people to be reasonable. People might care less about certain things, act in ways that lead to fights, while others may be in a ready-to-go-to-blows mentality, just waiting for someone to push their buttons. Yeah, we've never heard anybody like that. That's another version of the energy loop effect, where heightened, crowded rooms, places, energies, aggressions play off each other. Increases in sexual tension also at the club could also lead to an increased fighting over who's going home with who. Humans generally, as a collective, seem to lack responsibility, self-responsibility, and personal discipline, and this weakness seems to show itself during these periods. And so thoughts, emotions, actions that lead to conflicts often occur subconsciously, with the fighting parties, gangs, or political groups having no knowledge of the solar war link, because that's what we're dealing with, solar wars. Yet we could see people acting it out anyways, like some Shakespearean play. Negative energies during these intense periods can easily loop off each other, amplifying the wave. So I hope these writings, these notes that I have put into a document, I hope that they're making sense in understanding this concept. Countries also, think about the deep solar minimum concerns. Countries struck hard by crop losses and oppressions can be weakened further by wars it cannot afford to fight or win. Okay, I'm going to pause right there. The formula holds true even today as the warning signs appear and reappear. Factors like resource depletion can lead to water wars, food wars, land wars, oil wars, even wars over rare earth minerals. Changes in solar activity can greatly affect a nation's productivity, and a strong dip downwards for a prolonged period of time could be related to other systematic problems. Water wars has been in the collective psyche for a number of years. The future of the American heartland farms faces an uncertain future under the next phase of the deep solar minimum trade war with China. We're at risk. This you know. Extremely low solar activity could trigger sudden resource wars, possibly even invasions from one country into another, as people starve around the world. Have the global powers that be been preparing this whole time for resource wars by 2025? Okay. Now that is an actual question that has an actual answer. The answer is yes. Take a look at the Rand Corporation document, how they forecasted losing a war with China in 2025. So these are some really important concepts to understand. We're going to pause before going to the next section. Make sure this is coming into focus. All the images are relevant, whether we're looking at the influence of the cosmic rays. Is our world a simulation to the changes in the magnetic field? This was taken at Lorhurst Park in Portland, Oregon, back in 2010 by an old friend named Brenda. So we are seeing the geopolitical tensions build. I'm going to address this question about coming up with the idea of the elite using the solar cycles against us. Early on in my media activism, interviews, reports, and by the way, that image there represented the death of being on TV on Thursday nights, and it ushered in an era of major challenge in getting the word out after 2010. That was a Dallas protest against the NDAA with fellow Ron Paul supporters, 2012. Okay. Early on in my media activism, interviews, reports, there was a lot of focus on the event that led to these wars. Okay, that's code language for the day they really don't want us to talk about. The day they really don't want people to question or look into anymore, right? There was a time in which it was okay, right? Things have changed, obviously so. So regardless of anyone's view on that specifically, it did occur during a solar peak in late 2001. As my own awakening began, I know what I perceived spiritually within about the direction that that event was to send our world and other countries. These strong moments of intuition during that solar cycle were the things that I felt conscious of in a changing energy in the world and the city of Portland. My own dark ages of early adulthood, confusion, mistakes, my own disorientation transformed into a new reality once I began to speak my truth. By the time I came across studies of the solar cycles and wars by BURYL PAYNE, floodgates of dots began to connect within me, specifically the pattern of major world events, riots, wars, invasions, strategically launched or occurring at certain periods of peak energy. A method to the madness when they push the red button, so to speak, metaphorically and literally. Okay, we'll also be going over this in different stages. Okay, so this is very relevant when you look at the past videos. Alexander Chizhevsky, when you look at Edward Dewey, when you look at the things that they discovered and figured out. You know, it's very important to understand that the information that they came across may have been ultimately used over time. The knowledge perfected as the think tanks go deeper and deeper and deeper into their studies, how to affect human brainwave activity, while not actually disclosing what they're doing to the population, while preparing for large conflicts in the future during certain periods in time. Okay, so we are looking at a particular formula in place and a lot of information. And so I'm recording these videos during a time in which I believe that there's more receptiveness and understanding of some of these ideas, some of which may have been scoffed at just years ago. It's been this year in 2019 that we've seen an explosion in information about the scientific effects. In fact, somebody sent me an email last night showing me a great video, well over 10 minutes, on the Caltech study. These are real scientific reports that revolutionize our understanding of the correlations between the sun and world events. So by the time I came across these studies, right, many dots began to connect for me. Specifically, a pattern of major world events, riots, wars, invasions, launched or occurring around certain periods of peak energy. Our world is full of books about deceptions from on high, mind control, and patterns regarding dates, numerology, right, regarding key events. But I quickly found that no one could be seen mixing the ideas of events that are suspected to be manufactured during geomagnetic storms to capitalize on the quick flux change in human thought. Like the Caltech study talks about a 60% drop in alpha brainwave states, like in milliseconds, followed by an immediate return to normal. Like, why wouldn't they be trying to capitalize on mind control potential? So I'm sharing with the world now how I perceive that they view us and control us. Many have heard about the hypothetical room where presidents are shown the JFK tape in order to keep them in line. But you know what? I imagine that the ultimate powers that be, as far as the dark side, there is power above the dark side. Always remember that. There's the creator above the dark side. But we are in a fallen world, I believe, with the dark side running amok. So I imagine that those powers that should not be are in their own little room with high-tech software programs, supercomputers, right? Displaying all kinds of full color, real-time monitoring of humanity. Instructions on how to disrupt our energies likely lie in some kind of instructional manual of a high-tech nature. There is the human intelligence agency kind of expression. Then there's going a realm up or going a realm down, depending on how you're looking at it, regarding the hierarchy of social control. To the non-human entities, we are batteries, similar to Morpheus explained to Neo in the Matrix movie. We'll also go through these slides that are the key slides relating to the particular conversation at hand. So we are batteries to them unless we choose to unplug and not allow ourselves to be batteries to them. This is very important with regards to meditation. Without a doubt, they have knowledge of the mysteries of the sun and may use its key phases for even transport in and out of this world. Also to wage a very specific type of battle on the human soul through wars, violence, suffering, by essentially possessing as many people as possible, even temporarily. This is where I'm drawing a big red marker around public safety, including women's safety, future wars, mental health, the need for spiritual protection as our veil thins further. Oh, we won't overlook men's safety and the right for good men to have a place in this world and to not be oppressed. We need to see a rise in free people everywhere. So new technologies like 5G may be purposefully installed now prior to 2025 in an attempt to direct humanity away from evolution. Top secret space exploration is likely strategized or coordinated with the state of space weather, with the deepest discoveries likely being kept a secret. Right? So why would they tell people, ultimately, what they have discovered? While the powers that be are likely using the cycles for their own gain, ignorance of the solar cycles plagues the state of public schools. It would be really interesting to talk to the late John Taylor Gatto in today's day and age, for example, about the potential education about the sun that should be out there in our world. Just like they, teach people about taking care of your teeth and other things. Well, it seems like they're more interested in giving kids fluoride and other things, rather than them learning all the known scientific truths. There was definitely more of a focus on planets. I believe that with what little I do remember from middle school, and rockets. That's right, rockets going off into space. That was 6th grade. Massive events like Hurricane Katrina in 2005 and Fukushima in 2011 occurred after X-class solar flares erupted from the sun, causing geomagnetic storms on Earth. Most alternative media researchers, though, question the official story, stop their investigation at HAARP. And we could see many videos on YouTube suggesting government manipulation, but not discussing maybe in conjunction also with the solar energy. I'm here to say, in 2019, I've been saying it for years, that we shouldn't discount the power of the sun to play a major role in these earth-changing events. Of course, this debate is still being had in the climate change discussion. The question is, how much the ionosphere, atmosphere, and other fields have already been weaponized already, and to what degree? So I suggest that the global powers that be have ideas on how to redirect storms and other things using the energy already available. Other technologies can send magnetic fields out into our reality, perhaps canceling out some of the beneficial rays of the sun and the magnetic rifts it creates in our world. Is there an agenda to create a more violent zombie class of humans in these new dark ages? It's just a coincidence that you're looking at a tank and a sun from a little graphic illustration made decades ago, and we're looking at world events of the sun waking up in tanks. I mean, that's on one level just a coincidence, but it happened, guys, that we're looking at this graphic, and we could step back from politics and just be honest with these synchronicities. And some people may not even be aware that they are responding to the changes in the sun with their behavior. And so when we look at the writings of Edward Dewey, when we look at the writings of Carol Moore, we see this theme coming up. In a separate video, we'll look at a full article by Carol Moore. She comes the closest to the thoughts of Alex ANSARY, hypothesizing how the powers that be may use the solar cycle. Her ideas touch upon it. The people are collectively energized when the sun wakes up from a quiet state, and movements naturally form and go into action. A great deal of political movements are already believed to be controlled. Could it be the agenda of the powers that be to drain humanity of their energy by focusing control over their movements directly and indirectly? What was the result of Occupy Wall Street or the Tea Party? What about so many other movements that have come and gone? Hollywood and pop culture captures the imagination of our society in other ways through sun symbolism. So I recognize the sun symbolism that is used being in commercials, BP, because they're capitalizing on what's in the collective. So the dark occultists behind the powers that be understand the makeup of the human body. That's why you see the sun symbolism, sometimes the halo around politicians. I mentioned examples like Obama and Bush in past videos. This is really important information. Look at the studies about Princeton University suggesting that human thought can synchronize. Well, then they found a causal factor early on. And even if some people have found like a spiritual potential element to this, right? Doesn't mean that the powers that be can't then take those studies and go, yeah, we can use this. And why would it be limited to the United States? Look at the advances in the science of other countries. Okay, so going forward into this even further, like I said, you might need to sit down for this because there's many different angles. Dark occultists are behind the powers that be. Events, panics, or wars are staged during solar peaks to provoke a certain emotional response that leads to a certain outcome. problem, reaction, solution. Okay. And by design, we are going through this information at random, the slideshows. And so things are not meant to entirely line up. By the way, the image that you're seeing there with regards to that is from conflictnations.com. It's like they want us to like almost visualize our own downfall. I think there's a place to warn people with regards to these things that are taking place. But we don't want to try to create that reality. Just point in a direction of potential warning. Ask the questions, how might the powers that be already be preparing us for this reality through the imagery? Maybe something that they know is coming, but they're not trying to help us survive per se. I mean, this is the time to really have that consciousness shift on the individual level, and I believe you can do it. And I believe we can do it. But we've got to look at these studies from Dr. Robert Becker, Dr. FREEDMAN. We've got to take a look at where we're going in the 2020s. You got to understand, if they've done studies about people more likely to off themselves, I'm here to ask you a question. We can ask ourselves the question together. Are the powers that be using the formula of certain times people off themselves more? Do they strategize then to launch those irrational wars when people are caught up in the mania? The sad thing is people think that it's mania for me to have this understanding. You live now in a world of 2019 where people think that it's a mania that I have this understanding, that I've looked at the modern expression of these formulas, picking up where Carol Moore, picking up where BURYL PAYNE, picking up where Alexander Chizensky, picking up where others left off, and giving tribute to them, recognizing these men and women that came before me, that made these levels of, that connected these dots on their own. Look at Carol Moore. She connected these dots on her own, an old hippie from the heyday. Every one of us can figure these things out. This is not rocket science. This is not rocket science. This is not something that Alex ANSARY just dreamed up. He just found the modern correlations for the people of 2019 without it just being another 1970s reference pointing you in the direction of the 2020s. I'm not that bad of a guy. I am, for a very specific reason, honing in on this message at this time. Waiting for the people of Earth to see the significance of this and the things that we're going to be experiencing in the next couple of years and how it follows the solar cycle. If governments are on their toes, they have bookmarked this page, says Carol Moore. Now think about that. And think about the idea of interference in the day and age of the targeted researcher as we move into the 2020s. And this is why the path that I'm on brought me closer to the Creator. As I say each and every day, thy will, not mine, be done. As I do not choose to separate the Creator and God's will from the overall changes in the sun. That I am not here to be afraid of anything that happens to the sun or with the sun. There may be scary things that happen down here on Earth, but one could say that it's almost a psychic attack for people to be lost in a misunderstanding of what's going on, or to be stuck as a slave because of the mind control and the wars and the slavery that the coming wars may bring. Because we're going to stay out of prediction, but we are going to look at the information that was already left behind, and we are going to see it as significant as we see these events take place in the South China Sea and beyond. This is not a joke. This is not CGI. These movements are increasing worldwide as the sun wakes up. So I care about people. And I was saying a decade ago, the purpose in connecting the solar cycle. This is the amount of UFOs that have been reported over the years. Now, notice how it goes up and down. There's a flux. I think that also follows the solar cycles, and the powers that be may be using our solar cycles to come in and out of this world as we see the rise and fall of civilizations. They say on average about 338 years for most civilizations. Where are we going? Just because it's a low expected solar cycle coming up in 25 to some, it doesn't mean that it's not going to be as powerful. That was an old projection. Current projections show that it could be about the same as solar cycle 24. So are you familiar with problem, reaction, and solution and the concept of the FF, the false F? And I'm not talking about fried chicken. We're talking about flagged words. We're talking about concepts and ideas that they don't want us to discuss. Okay, let's go back to some of the reading as we go back and forth between an essay, which I will be publishing all of this for free on the website. It's enough information to be an ebook, but instead I want to work into some other deeper material and then build. I'm just going to pause here. I would like to create a massive or a very large book full of a lot of information and personal life stories in a physical book, a zine, made available for as affordable as possible. It wouldn't be Amazon based. I haven't decided on anything yet, but over the course of the next calendar year, I'm going to be doing more writing. It would be great to hook up with a direct publisher in case anyone does end up subscribing to this channel that's involved in publishing. So ebooks, where I'm starting now, is a way that I'm starting in a much easier way than authors 20 years ago, 30 years ago. You actually have to pay a certain amount of money for an ISN for the actual physical book. There's money involved. There's impressing people that's required to get your book published and put into a store. But ultimately, that is the eventual goal, to be able to reach the most people worldwide with valuable information. And so this is something that I'm think tanking. Okay, so we're going to return to some of the points that I made in the slides as far back as 2013. These ideas were not originally discovered. And I want to remind the audience, especially people that just found me, that I experienced homelessness and bad luck after attending Mark Passio's Free Your Mind conference. Mark Passio did a good thing by bringing people together for that. But I faced a certain level of interference when I returned to Portland, Oregon. Somehow, this information about the sun was not relevant to Portland, Oregon, despite the fake hippie progressive front that they deceived the nation with. But a lot of people have woken up to the Portland deception with the recent violence. And I'm here to tell you, I brought this knowledge back to Portland 2014, and no one saw something in it. I've moved beyond that, and I've transcended that, but it's always troubled me. And that's one of the reasons I don't return to Portland, despite the so-called perception of progressiveness. This information should be looked at. You could see that I put out warnings in 2013 regarding how I viewed activity in the coming solar cycle 25. These were projections for our time period now, moving into 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. These were projections based on the pattern recognition. I think most of you understand that. This was the outlook from 2013, looking beyond Obama, looking beyond that presidential cycle, and looking at the 2020s. Here we see Uncle Sam with his hand out and China next to it in a collage based on intuition with the alien overlord theme in the upper right. It isn't so much about the people, the independent personalities of the politicians, or what you think is controlling the show. It's what reality is, beyond what's been put out there on the internet and even put out there by the kings of conspiracy. The reality of what's really going on is not known. I think that there is an agenda for Sunspot 25, and I put it out there what I think it could be. And this dovetails the interview with the man that had a vision of China and Russia breaching our nation's defenses. Other videos for hours and hours get into his dream. He doesn't mention a year. He mentions scenarios that he's been seeing in reoccurring dreams since he was 10. Okay, so there's specific things that are going on in those scenarios. Okay. Things like the West Coast in China, things like the East Coast and Russia, things like it coming as a surprise, things like the whole world being turned against the United States in advance, things like many other themes that have basically been regular themes the last decade on this channel. And I've decided that at a certain point, we got to go beyond warning people. I was mentioning this at outsidethebox.vhx.tv, where I do videos. It's never audio only. It's always video. Please sign up for more, because the future of Alex ANSARY talking about China is at outsidethebox.vhx.tv. Understand the precarious situation that I'm in as a content creator. Wake up to what's taking place to other YouTube content creators. I will not be silenced, but I will not be reckless with my platform. Most of you understand this. Most of you understand the concept of strategy and not the bull in the china shop strategy. Most of you understand, like, the 15 years that I've dedicated my life to helping the people understand what could be coming and making this connection with the solar flare effect over humans. And so if you look at the arena of solar flares, they don't get into China and what's coming with the potential war. You get in the world of ufology and recording periods of sightings. Do they get into the solar flares and the potential connection with the 2020s and what could be coming? Some may do. And so what I'm here is to focus on what I feel called to speak of. And for 10 years, there's been consistent signs and arrows, if you will. You know, in the same way that milk and cookies go together, in the same way that a hamburger and fry go together, the same way that a smile and a ride at the park go together, or a kiss with your girlfriend. We look at the solar cycles and the wars and what's coming with China. Absolutely. You heard it here first. And if they have figured out that the Earth's magnetic field can cause suicides, can they then weaponize that and create conflicts? Boogie, boogie, boogie. Somebody got you, hit you over here. And then to cause a certain type of reaction in the actual population. The Institute of North Industrial Ecology Problems in Russia looked at activity in the Earth's geomagnetic field from 1948 to 1997, and we're to assume that this information hasn't been weaponized. We are going through major changes on this planet, and this process will only accelerate. Continuing. Events, panics, or wars are staged during solar peaks to provoke a certain emotional response, launching certain peaks during certain projects during periods and celestial events. Don't forget about eclipses and moons, based on a belief that their luck will be magnified. Maybe planets passing by. Anybody see Mars? Moving certain goals forward during solar minimums, during times where the least amount of protest is expected. Where are we now in the cycle? Also, in the world of astrology, they're talking about Saturn a lot these days, and many planets being in retrograde around this time of the eclipse. So they understand the makeup of the human body and the stress responses. If the emotional center is affected by a manufactured event or the brain, think about the trauma from an event, it could be easier then to direct them to war, external or internal. Don't forget the 4 components. So they use the 4 components. Take the, on average, 11-year cycle. It's sliced into 4. Take a pie, slice it into 4. Even the solar orb itself, the sun, has 4 sides. 4 is significant in many ways. We have the 4 directions in Native American spirituality with the sun in the east. We have 4 significant all across Surya, one of the main names for the sun deity, also known as the creator in East India. You have 4 deities that it is thus represented or expresses itself as they're all interconnected into one. Then we also have the numerology of 5, though, bringing it all into completion. And 5 in the 4 cardinal directions. The 5th stone is the soul. The 5th stone is the soul. Periods, as we just said, in which humans may off themselves, could be periods in which they manipulate things to try to get people to die for a cause. Absolutely. Absolutely. Hear me now. Can you hear me now? Look at the periods, look at the correlations, and look at the lack of awareness in today's institutions and higher science. Look at the reality of a guy speaking into a microphone in the woods. Because in the urban areas, even if there would be a few dozen people now going, yes, Alex, push the information forward, I'm also sitting on the sidelines going, is this message reaching the world yet? The people that really need to hear it, because we need to take this message to more people. Many books need to be written. We need to build a scientific institute. If there was a person with the resources listening to this, we can build a study, an office that's available to the public, like a library. And from that study, we can do videos. From that office space, right, somewhere on the East Coast, somewhere on the West Coast, or somewhere in Middle America, maybe Denver, Colorado, maybe Glenwood Springs, maybe Trinidad, maybe somewhere out there, maybe Aspen, Colorado, maybe Boulder, Colorado. Someone's listening now that has the office, that has the resource. But you know what? I'm not going to try too hard. We're not going to try so hard, Alex. You should try hard. Now, I'm going to leave it up to the creator. It's up to the creator. If the creator wants to direct people to me that can be of assistance to this message getting out there, that is awesome. But I'm not going to try to step around the creator. If I'm meant to continue what I'm doing in the manner in which I've been doing it, I accept. Because I accept the truth that a history of researchers in this particular field faced challenges and judgment in their life. Maybe people thought they had different intentions. Who knows what all Stalin thought of Alexander Chizevsky? I know that in this life, right, there are misunderstandings, even in 2019, as to why somebody would be talking about something like this. BURYL PAYNE made a pretty large contribution to adding on to the information from Alexander Chizevsky and others, noting the ascent and descent of the sunspot cycle. So that would be the early 2020s, where we are looking at the greatest possibility of the beginning stages of a conflict that can lead up to the peak period or peak activity of a war. Not the launch, right? But of the peak. And this graphic here that you just saw was a projection of solar cycle 25 all the way back from the year 2009. It has been updated since, and it is expected to be on par or slightly greater, or maybe a little less, depending on which study you're looking at, than the cycle that we just came out of. But here's the kicker. It's the Earth's weakening magnetic field. And you know what happens when that happens. We all know what happens when that happens. It's an increased effect from the rays and activity of the sun. And it wasn't by accident that that day in Dallas, Texas, that I and some Ron Paulers were putting out the information about NDAA, because that was a concern about slavery. That was a concern about executive order, executive control over our lives. And so there's something about when the sun is active that even though there's wars, there is something happening within consciousness. And I suspect that it's because we're at our most powerful that other unfortunate events are staged to drain our energies. Major wars are a great example of a manufactured event on a worldwide level to capture the energies of the humans, and in some cases their souls. So is there a fear in the upper echelons of government of them losing their control globally? Are they staging these conflicts potentially before they lose full control of their Tower of Babel? These are the questions that I'm asking you, because we may not have the answers right away to the questions that we ask. It's about posing the questions to begin with and waiting for the answer. And we may have to wait for the answer, but they will eventually arrive. So here are some realities that we need to face as represented by the slides. Some humans are more insusceptible to influence than others and seek liberation mentally, spiritually, physically. Other humans are easier to influence and naturally take commands. So this would go beyond ethnicity. This would include, like all humans, in each society, regardless of ethnicity, you would find within that society, be it India, be it the Middle East, be it somewhere in Europe, be it somewhere in Africa, some of the humans are into freedom and some of the humans are into slavery. And so we have our own version of that and how it works through multiple political cycles. I'm an independent, so I don't have a bone to pick with, I don't have like a dog in the race, rather, in the upcoming thing. It's Coke versus Pepsi. It's McDonald's versus Burger King. And these used to be normal for us to have this awareness. And this basic level awareness has been eroded from our society in this deep solar minimum, in this current dark ages. As we come out of the dark ages, as we come out of 2019 into 2020, into 2021, I think you're going to see a lot of people say, I'm waking up now again. I get it. I'm waking up. Won't get fooled again. No, you just need to maintain this through each political cycle. The whole thing is rigged. To me, as an independent, that is the way to clarity. Going back to the essay, human beings that are out of alignment with their own truth are the most susceptible to having their perceptions and emotions used against them, pulling them further into a deep state of serfdom and spiritual bankruptcy. The forces of darkness use members of our society as cannon fodder as long as there is a pool of susceptible minds. How do you maintain a pool of susceptible minds? Cue the Jeopardy theme. Instantaneous technology, smartphones in the hands of people that never once touched an encyclopedia, crafting reality for them. Like the painting of a picture with a paintbrush, but it being the perception of reality, being painted by a hand of darkness, a hidden hand, controlling the world governments, controlling the entire internet. So the game plan for the rest of the cycle, we did cover that. And it is disturbing for people to hear that, but that analysis was put out in 2013. I think there is an event coming that could turn the whole world against the United States, and out of this they create a new UN or League of Democracy to bring a promise to end the war of all wars. Manufactured internal things and events. Well, since 2013, when I first made this slide, I think that we've only seen an increase in that. So I'm going to call all these concerns and speculations, not predictions, with the hope that they never happen, but withholding the concern and how long I've had this is something I can't do. I can't do that. Can't do it. And I've said every step of the way, I hope these things don't happen, but that's not really for me to decide. And it's an insult to me to say that if I'm even hypothesizing certain things, that I'm working to make it happen. That's a complete misunderstanding of the law of attraction. And that's how some people misunderstand how things really work. I've speculated of a particular scenario unfolding this last 10 years with 2025 always in mind. And now we're hearing that we are about to enter the first stages of Solar Cycle 25 with a peak in 2025. Where X may potentially mark the spot. I'm Alex ANSARY signing off. I hope you enjoyed this. If you want to see this channel progress forward and survive the YouTube apocalypse, please check out patreon.com/AlexAnsary.